And welcome back to Nifilmism. I'm Ryan.
I'm Drew.
Last time we were talking about Ready Player One and what was the other one? Quiet Place? Yeah, Quiet Place. And we were talking after that episode about just book versus show sort of stuff, or book versus movie. And that sort of got us into a conversation about Game of Thrones. Now, I have read the book series Song of Ice and Fire. I'm on my fourth run through of it. I actually moderate a discussion forum online for it. Drew, you're just a show guy.
Yep. I'm just classic show guy.
So this is gonna be one of those conversations that we've had before, and lightning in a bottle that we'll never recapture. But we're gonna try for you, our loyal listeners.
We are pushing the button. This is earlier than we thought we would push the button.
We are gonna go full Game of Thrones now, and we are going to talk about Game of Thrones because I thought it'd be interesting to see what perspective a show-only viewer who doesn't really know the books.
It's not, and I'm not one of the spiteful show only guys. Well, in a way, because I refuse to read the books until Martin has a finish. I'm not going to get invested in something that may not have an end. I say this if you're a nerd like me. If you've ever heard of Berserk, I read Berserk, so I'm a huge moron for saying this, but that's a series that feels like it's never going to have an end. But no, this is one of the hills I'm gonna die on with Game of Thrones, is that I don't want to read the books until there's a finite ending, regardless of if it's completely different from what the show is, and by God, it better be completely different from what the show is.
We'll get into that in a minute, but oh shit,
it's a bad pour.
It's a really bad fucking pour. Almost wasted that beer.
No, I'm not one of those. I'm only spiteful in the sense that, will this guy get off his ass and finish the books? It's not that I discredit the books or think the TV show has done things better, because I from what limited knowledge of me reading the Song of Ice and Fire wiki has told me, no, there's a lot of stupid decisions made in the show.
And I don't want to spend a whole episode talking about just theories about what George R. R. Martin is doing. That being said, I'm firmly of the belief that he's trying to distance himself from the show, because what started out as something excellent has gotten to the point where I think it's moving away from the themes that he was trying to go for. And because it's moving away from those themes, the show is suffering and turning into a little bit more...
Do you think he's got it done, or do you think, in a way, this is him letting somebody else finish his notes, and then him being like, wow, that's a choice I won't make? Writing that down. No, that's a choice I definitely won't make. Or maybe I'll incorporate that. Like, do you think it's him kind of letting the story grow organically away from him so that he can find what he wants to do?
No, at this point, the book and the show are so different that I really just think he's waiting for the show to be over so that he can focus on the book and make sure that it's still his own thing. I don't think he's done with the next book or two books or anything like that. I've heard those conspiracy theories, which are nuts.
They're just sitting on pages or something?
No, I don't think that. But there are plot lines that are in the book that never make it into the show, or at least they tried in the show, that are so hyper complicated that going back and keeping all of that straight. Plus, having read the books, Martin's brilliant.
Is it just the issue of the show would not... of even an episodic series not being able to handle that many spinning plates?
Correct.
It's just you'd have the intro and you'd be jumping like from everywhere on the map, and you'd be like, oh god, we're going everywhere today.
A lot of it is very subtle too. There are a lot of just themes and plot points that...
My biggest issue as a show watcher, now this is purely as a show watcher,
that's what I want to hear.
Every single episode you get the world map, so you see Essos and Westeros.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the fucking teleporting that happens in the series? It is awful. And they don't do anything to set up like 3 months later. Like, you could be lazy and just put a 3 months later on the bottom and be like, yeah, they sailed around. No, everybody fucking teleports in this show because we gotta get the show done. We gotta get the show done.
Full spoilers, and this is sort of where it went off the rails. Well, it went off the rails a couple seasons ago.
Yes.
When they fucked up Dorne. But in this past season, spoilers again.
If you're listening to us and you aren't watching this, you're an interesting person.
And we appreciate you for that.
Please keep listening. But no.
When they're stranded on that rock and they send Gendry back to the wall to try to get Daenerys to come and help, they give you a bit of an idea as to about how far it is from the wall to Dragonstone. And I did some quick calculations based on the speed of a carrier pigeon and the speed of, I mean, how fast could a dragon possibly go? Or how fast could something move before a human's knocked off the back of it if they're just hanging on? So I looked at the physics on this. Right, I pulled out the physics on this, and I thought, Jesus, this either this was days later, or these pigeons were going. I don't have the numbers in front of me. Going at what 100 something miles per hour, and then she was going back on that dragon at the speed of a 747. In order to get there and back overnight to save these guys who are out there freezing to death. It just, but I don't want to focus on. I want to stick to themes.
Yeah.
And yes, the show has sort of gone off the rails in terms of the writing.
They've thrown out a lot of the limited realism that a fantasy setting of this caliber has allowed in order to get narratives cinched up in the final seasons.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say mostly in the last season. I mean, there's a little bit of this stuff starting to creep up in the last handful where everybody's like, you know what, I think the show is starting to kind of fall apart. And then by now it's just kind of, okay, we're just tying stuff off.
Full confession. I am a big fan of a YouTuber by the name of Preston Jacobs. I mean, this guy has had articles written about his stuff. A few years back, a friend of mine, Anthony, introduced me to one of his videos where he goes into the book and the evidence as to whether or not Rhaegar and Lyanna had Jon Snow. And he really breaks all of it down. And he's the one that introduced me to the idea that there's a lot in these books that's there for the reader to figure out. Martin's writing a mystery. I mean, who killed Jon Arryn in the first season? The books tell you, or at least solve that mystery right off the bat, that it was not Jaime and Cersei. In the books, it's left totally ambiguous. Yeah. There's enough evidence in there that you can figure out who killed Jon Arryn, but he doesn't give you the actual official answer to that riddle until the third book. So, that being said, and this is going somewhere, what were your thoughts on the Dornish plot?
I feel like it was smothered in the crib. I feel like they wanted to go somewhere, and then they had to have seen the reaction to the Sand Snakes, and were like, people find this ridiculous. Let's just side this for a bit, and then we'll come back to it when we want to just nip it.
What if I told you that almost the entire book series isn't about ice zombies, but it's actually about Dorne?
Well, even in the show, the walkers thing has only come back into prominence in the last couple seasons when when we realized, like, oh yeah, this show has actually been about this secretly.
But it's not. It's, if you look, I mean, we both took most of the same courses, give or take, in college. The sociological concept, or the oh my god, this is the second time that I've gone full Rich Evans. Anthropological? Yeah. There we go. Anthropological concept of the other. Now, in the show, they call them White Walkers. Yeah, in the book, they're called the Others, which looks like it's going to be a huge bait and switch about how we just assume that things that aren't like us are villains. But Martin's other writings have all of these mutated humans that are simply seeking survival and maybe fresh genetic stock and all this other stuff. And there's a very good chance that the entire presence of the Others in the book is just a big bait and switch. It's a distant enemy that everyone focuses on, when in reality, almost all of his other writings, all of his other sci-fi writings, tend to be very anti-war. I mean, Vietnam makes its way into a lot of his... I mean, he's a child of that era. And he does a lot of writing about it. And you get a bit of this in the show where they sort of show you the horrors of war, but it really brings it out in the books.
And again, that's just different creators interpreting the same plot lines, where they don't where D.B. Weiss and David Benioff don't have that background. So,
well, but they talked with him. It
doesn't mean anything. You can pay lip service to a creator and be like, yeah, well, we got to do this way or whatever, because this is too big of a set piece. Or what is it in the books, like Mance Rayder could literally like turn into a minstrel or something. Like, there's just weird stuff like that they're like, you know what, we haven't built up enough cash with the customer that doing something like that makes sense for us at this point. So No, he's just gonna literally get burned.
Well, back to the Dornish. The Dornish are. I mean, there's a lot of cultural divide in Dorne, and it's a microcosm of the whole universe. You've got the salty Dornish and the stony Dornish. The stony Dornish are very much like the rest of Westeros, where they are all about patrilineal succession, and they look very much like the Andals and the First Men, versus the salty Dornish,
which aren't they mostly derived from people from like the Summer Isles and stuff?
Well, I mean, they,
more from an easterly
yes, origin. Exactly. Yeah. They're a little bit more tanned, and there's this great little snippet in the books where Doran Martell's watching some kids playing chicken in the water gardens, and this brown-skinned girl knocks this white boy off of the other kid's shoulders, from how I remember it going down, and then you really start to look at the Dornish plot, and a lot of it is about equal rights and social justice in the face of a very traditional feudalistic society.
Well, that too, and from what I know, they were the last kingdom that was brought to knee.
Yeah.
And you don't really get, other than a little bit of like occasional mentions maybe of that in the show, and then of course that plotline was just snuffed. So, I mean,
it was killed when you had the "but you want a bad pussy" line.
Yeah.
Some of the worst writing I have ever seen in a TV show. It's fucking awful.
But yeah, it felt like it was something that was probably built up to go somewhere, and then they didn't get enough of what they thought the direction was from him, or they didn't know what to do with it themselves, so they were just like, "Bah."
Well, he dropped out after season 3 or 4. He'd been doing some actual writing for the show, doing a lot of direct consulting, and then after season 3 or 4, when his influence was gone, you could tell it was okay. We've got the Cliff Notes. Let's just fill it in.
Yeah.
But thematically, everything changed. So, what at that point? Why even keep going? If it turns into just a Tolkien ripoff.
Well, it's if you want to talk about like theme and tone, I feel like it's completely 180. So I feel like the first handful of seasons kind of show you that being a good person doesn't get you anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like by now it's like, nope, your birthright, whether known or unknown, makes you special.
Oh, the whole Jon Snow thing.
Yeah.
And for the record,
like nobody like what are you gonna do? Are you gonna trot Bran out in front of like people who are going to verify this, so Grand Maesters or something, and be like, yeah, my brother is like the Three-Eyed Raven? They're gonna be like, what the fuck's that?
Dr. Bran.
He's like, don't worry about it. Yeah. Like, he's important, and he like literally can look into the past and be like, yeah, I'm totally the legitimate heir. Like, who's gonna buy this in this world at this point? So what you're gonna get in the show is some stupid CGI battle against really badly CGI animated zombies. I don't know. I have very little hopes for where this is going, because I feel like I'm not a big fan of like medieval or fantasy settings, like realistic or fictional. I like sci-fi, and even then limited. But I feel like we're getting to a point where it's going so heavy into the fantasy element that the realism that brought me into the setting is getting completely swiped off the board.
Which is funny, because there's a very good chance that this is actually a science fiction story.
I like this series. I've heard this. You talk about this at work.
Yeah, just to sum it up, in a lot of Martin's other works, he'll talk about something called an interregnum, and that's where a human civilization on some other planet has some sort of catastrophe and then falls back to medieval levels of technology, and that sort of explains how they ever had the technology for making castles from thousands of years ago, that have not even had a crack in their walls yet. Or something like the Wall. The Wall should have sublimated ages ago. It's far too big. And they talk about it weeping all the time. And ice falls off, yet somehow the wall still stands.
Yeah.
So the idea that this had been a human colony that fell back to medieval technology levels explains a shitload about it. But does that bring you back in knowing that, or the fact that they're getting away from it, does that sort of push you even further away?
I don't know. I just feel like you carefully built up narratives and threw curveballs in them for a lot of characters in this, and it's just a lot of the wrinkles are getting ironed out in the last couple of seasons, which makes sense, because you're you're pushing to a conclusion. But I don't know. It's one of those things where you're damned if you do, if you're damned if you don't, because you can have stuff not get resolved, which is realistic. Not everybody gets a resolution in life.
No,
not everything gets solved, but I feel like everything's getting solved.
Because at the end of the day, they're putting how many millions of dollars into each episode at this point?
It's super ambitious, and then it makes you mad that they never did this for Rome when Rome was on.
And Rome,
that was cross promoted though. That was BBC
but Rome had a legit. You had history to work from.
Yeah,
you had an excuse to do whatever plot you wanted to.
You could fill in what was known with what was unknown and what you wanted to turn salacious or whatever.
But this, like you said, started out super ambitious, and then somebody at HBO said, "Oh, okay, well, a generic anti-war story." Not generic, that's the wrong word, but an anti-war story, ambiguous. An ambiguous anti-war story isn't going to keep the casual viewer in. Well, and we need the casual viewers in order to pay the fucking bills and keep the lights on.
Yeah. Well, it's that, and I would say the best character that exemplifies why am I still invested is Peter Baelish in the show.
Yeah.
He completely loses any relevance by like season 3, and then he just keeps scheming behind the scenes. And at that point, it's just like Snidely Whiplash mustache twirling, and you're just like, I don't care. I'm not invested in your story. I feel like there's nowhere for you to go. And his character arc in the show, probably because of the lack of other character arcs that probably should be in the show that they excised because they were too ambitious. I don't know. Again, this is where you fill in the blanks, but it feels like they were kind of trying to trot him along because, well, he's an important character. We built him up for the first couple of seasons, but it felt like the Wizard of Oz. It felt like he was being built up as a real mover and shaker, and then you pulled the curtain and you're just like, oh no, he's just like a peasant boy basically who got what he got through scheming and dealing and will not lose that. And then, okay, I know what your character essentially is. There's no more growth for you. Either stick around alive to the wayside and maybe play around with stuff later, or get the fuck out the show because you're horribly boring.
And that's where the book, now his character is still alive and well in the show. In the book, and the show, he's dead in one of the worst plots. The whole Arya Sansa feud that never actually got resolved, but all of a sudden
that was two. See, that's hasty writing. That was a 2-episode. Well, I'm gonna start some shit between them. This character literally waited years to plan anything,
and for what? For no reason.
Yeah.
And that's, you're right. And in the books, it's very much his character has been plotting and scheming. His plotting gets him. He gives up his job as Master of Coin, where he's making a shitload of money, and he gets out of King's Landing to go north, marry Lysa Arryn, only to give it over to her son, and he can be the temporary protector, or the Lord Protector of the Vale. Why? I mean, why would you give up everything to go be the Lord Protector of the Vale for just a brief amount of time before you get kicked out eventually when this kid comes of age? You have to have a long-term... He's got some sort of long-term plan. And as a book reader, you're left wondering the whole time, what the fuck is this guy up to? And it's compelling because he's not doing it just for the sake of chaos. He's got some sort of plan. Martin would not have written this character to be just, he's doing this just because.
Yeah.
But getting back to the themes, as a book reader, the themes that I'm getting out of this are very, it's a lot of anti-war and a lot of bringing down, I don't want to say bringing down the patriarchy, but bringing down feudalistic society.
Yeah.
Really seems to be where he's going with it. I mean, all the trials by battle and all that. Even the characters know it's ridiculous.
It's basically screaming at the shackles of the rigidity of that system.
Yeah.
Where that's the only real way to keep any sense of civilization. But no, like I said, I feel like early on they try to establish that just because you're virtuous and kind or whatever, that doesn't mean anything. And that's something that people really need to learn because all of our media and all of our literature kind of kowtows to the just be a good person and it'll get you far. That's not how the real world works. So that drew me in is the aspect of who the fuck cares how virtuous your father is or your family was like.
So, no. At this point, why are you still watching? Just curious.
It's because I've invested the time and I don't know. I've got this thing where I don't mind watching the train wreck.
Okay. I'm invested too. I enjoy the production.
And even though he's a complete Mary Sue, I don't mind Jon Snow because he's had such a limited part in a lot of everything that when he started getting into prominence, even though everything else around narratively was falling apart, like, cool, like, I'm okay with this super, like, you're the Superman character. He's such a Mary Sue, though. He's so...
plot armor. I mean,
it's so
and that's
ridiculous.
The other problem. For the last couple of seasons, I have not been nervous for the fate of any character. I've known, unlike in the books, I've known that all of the characters 1 through 8, you're not going to kill Tyrion, you're not going to kill Jon Snow, you're not going to kill Daenerys. Bronn's a fan favorite, but he's sort of the Daryl of the Daryl of this show.
That's a great analog. Great analog. No. It's stuff like I don't care that Jon Snow's a Mary Sue. He's the superhero character, so it's fine to kind of watch him. The guilty pleasure character, and then anybody is lying if they're not saying they're watching for Clegane.
I'm not, and that's another theme thing. So you don't know officially in the books that the Hound survived, but it's strongly hinted that he's a gravedigger at this little monastery. And we're all anticipating him coming back, much like he did in the show.
In the show narrative.
But that's, again, where it gets twisted, because the whole idea of the context of where he ends up is a tortured soul maybe actually being able to get away from it and find some peace. Yeah. Someone who has been awful their whole life because of circumstances that maybe finds a modicum of just peace at the end of their story.
Yeah.
And we don't know where that story is going to go, but it would be...
It's so weird because when you look at the show, you have a lot of characters that are rooted in a warped realism of like logically, if they're going to get out of it, it's going to be through this. And then now they're just superhuman. Like, Arya is ridiculous. Arya's a ridiculous character.
And inconsistent.
Huh?
Grossly inconsistent.
Yeah, I mean, like their character arc in terms of their emotions makes sense. Like Arya being just like completely able to detach herself makes sense. But like she's got like a freaking like X-Men level power set at this point.
But also not being able to detach herself and see that her sister maybe isn't trained as a paranormal assassin that can why is she even...
You know what the best, most realistic character in all of this is at this point is probably Sansa.
Yeah.
Because Sansa has literally been like she's been through the worst shit. And by playing the game, by playing the game, she's gotten to a level of, like, I'm in charge. What I say goes, and there's nobody really questioning me.
When they proclaimed Jon Snow King of the North, when clearly they should have been rallying behind Sansa, this was very much, I know who the main character is. Contrary to every theme in the books, Jon Snow's the main character, ergo King of the North, even though... Sansa's the one that won that battle by bringing the army of the Vale in. Jon Snow fucked that battle up by just charging in.
Yeah.
She has the blood. She has every right
not to
to
mention
Winterfell.
Jon Snow's force was comprised pretty much of wildlings that have literally been raiding the North for years on end.
But I'm glad you said that because that brings up another point that they really get at in the books, but maybe not so much in the show, is that this wall went up hey, insert modern political analogy here. This wall goes
you
up.
get very little of it in the show, but like the free folk are the most analogous to like a democratic society.
They are.
Granted, they had a king, but
They
after
chose
Mance
him.
Rayder's died, they're just like,
Because they chose him.
yeah, they're just they have like,
but they are people. That's it. They're just a wall went up, and given that Martin has a lot of references to Robert Frost, he's probably referencing the Mending Wall, and that is all about, hey, do walls make for do they separate us? Do they make more enemies? Are they good? It really gets into the idea of it's probably a bad idea to put barriers between people.
yeah.
And the books really get into, man, these walls went up. We just happened to be on different sides when the wall went up. We shouldn't have been fighting each other this whole time, though. It's that's we aren't enemies. There.
Yeah,
And do you get that really from the show?
I feel like they've been really hinting at it more when they decided to be like, hey, we have like this snow zombie army that's really gonna kill everything, so maybe all this shit means nothing. Only when they decided to be like, hey, let's focus on the actual narrative we've built early on.
Plus people like Tormund.
Yes. I don't know. It's such a guilty pleasure show, but it's competent enough that it's not as guilty pleasure as absolute dog shit like The Walking Dead. I watch The Walking Dead practically on mute while watching stuff on YouTube because it's that terrible at this point.
But that's even more frustrating because what started as a truly groundbreaking show, an excellent show for
became
3 seasons. Yeah.
Well, this is a huge tangent, but being like a fan of anime, this happens a lot with that genre. Is there will be anime that are being made arguably contemporary with the manga that it's copying, the cartoon, the comic it's copying, and they'll catch up in the art because manga is written and drawn by one person, so their workload is crazy. So you'll catch up to what they're writing, and you'll be like, "Shit, what do we do now?" So they'll create filler arcs until the author can catch up, and then stuff might diverge, and then the show becomes completely different. And I feel like it's this aspect that's hurting this show and this book is that you're at the point where you've completely caught up, and you're like crafting your own stuff. And in that genre, in anime, sometimes they'll go back and just redo the series to be a hardline adaptation. I don't think they're going to do this for this. They definitely not, because it's live action. Costs are ridiculous. But it's one of those things that being coming from that interest in my myriad of things I'm into, it makes sense to me, and I can see what's happening. So it's kind of that, oh, like you really had to push that quickly to jump forward and all that.
And it's a shame because what was a compelling story has fallen prey to, oh, hey, we have contracts with this actor or whatever the case may be, so we can't get rid of them. Plus fan favorite, plus we need to make a boatload of money to pay for all of this stuff.
It's almost like the series, if you wanted to do a better adaptation, would be almost unfeasible because you'd probably have to do like 2 or 3 years between seasons so that characters could age appropriately to where they are in the books.
And even then, they aged up everyone to start this. I mean, Ned Stark, Ned and Catelyn are like early to mid 30s when
which makes sense for the medieval style setting where you're probably not going to live to your 60s, really.
Even with that, I mean, look at the kids. Rob and John start as essentially young adults, whereas they're 15, I think, when the book starts. Which actually is part of the plot where no one respects them. I think a lot of that is you have to accept it because you really can't have Khal Drogo raping a 13-year-old girl and still get a regular release. Yeah. So, there is that. Yeah, you have to allow certain things to happen and just be like, okay, I understand. Well,
and tell me as a reader, do they really read like kids of that age?
Yes and no.
Really? I have a hard time believing that a 13-year-old is going to read like a 13-year-old in a book.
Yes and no, because you see a big difference between, say, a kid who is growing up at Winterfell as part of the nobility, who is being groomed for being a noble,
versus somebody like Hot Pie who's a shit kid.
And you find a kid, and actually I think that works to the show or to the book's advantage is that you get a bigger disparity between these characters just because of their upbringing and everything else. We're hitting about a half an hour here. I could talk about Game of Thrones all day. There's a bunch of stuff that we didn't touch on that I'd like to at some point. So I think we'll call it quits here. We will get back to this
Definitely
topic.
Gonna come back to the topic at some point, but I don't know. It's seen better. The show is, in summation, the show has definitely seen better days. Hopefully, the books continue on what is apparently still a good tangent.
And we didn't even really get into the topics that I wanted to. I really wanted to talk about just the themes of the book versus the themes of the show and how, Jesus, I mean, they are so vastly different at this point.
The show is so tied into just the medieval idea of
and it's just
your name is everything, basically.
It's so generic.
Yeah.
And we'll get back to that next time. Again, thanks for listening. Feel free to leave any comments that you'd like. If you'd like us to jump into any fan theories that you might have heard. I mean, we've got a whole fucking year before the next season comes out. So I know that there are a ton of fan theories out there. I'm familiar with most of them, both book and show. So if you want us to maybe tackle some of those or anything else, if there's any specific plots or characters you want us to go a little bit deeper into, please let us know in the comments.
You know what I just remembered? Westworld's back this weekend.
Yes.
So another good show to possibly talk about if you haven't watched it. Watch season 1. HBO is really good about this stuff. They probably will marathon it this weekend, probably twice, because they are awesome about this when there's new seasons coming out. If you haven't watched it and you listen to this show, watch Westworld.
Yes.
Watch Westworld.
If you just want to catch up with a good summary, Screen Junkies did, not one with any real analysis, just a, hey, this is what happened, and they do it chronologically, which, if you haven't watched it, is a huge help. Or if you want to get more into the themes of it.
There are episodes that you don't want to be spoiled on in Westworld, though.
Yeah, but if you're looking to just jump right in,
it's not Jonathan. It's not Jonathan Nolan. It's his brother, or it's not Christopher Nolan. It's his brother Jonathan, and Jonathan's wife. But there's a lot of that. Oh shit! I didn't realize that type of. It's good. It's really good.
Well, if you're looking for just to catch up, though, Screen Junkies did an excellent one about a week ago, which is just chronological and very to the point.
I think I want to watch it just because I'm one of those people, even when I know stuff, I want to see how people do a better presentation of, here's the cliff notes of what you're watching.
If you want to get into the themes of it, then definitely head over to actually the same guy that I'm a big fan of his Game of Thrones work, Preston Jacobs. He's also a fan of Westworld, and he did an excellent analysis of the themes of the show in part 10, because he did an episode by episode. So his 10th one you can just watch on its own because it gets into everything you need it to. Thanks for listening. Again, drop us some comments. This is one that I'd like to have some back and forth on. So hopefully we will talk.
Either on the YouTube channel or on
the Facebook.
Or
on the
talk to us. Tell us we're assholes. Tell us something, because we want to react to what you want to see or what you have to say about episodes. Because we'll revisit topics if you've got something that, hey, why didn't you go into this? And maybe we were just too thick-headed to think about what your topic was.
On that,
we want to keep this as a dialogue.
Yeah,
be part of it, please. If there are any of you out there.
I mean, we'll happily just talk to each other about this all the time, but it is more fun to have other people involved. So we will hopefully hear from you, and we'll get back to this topic when we've got some more time.